do all guitars sound the same? More specifically, do all electric guitars sound the same? So if you are an active viewer in the guitar community on YouTube, you may have seen Glenn's video from Spectra Sound Studios recently, where he did a blind test comparing a Les Paul and a Strat. And it's really interesting, a couple of videos, and I wanted to just spend a few minutes today talking about this because, well, for two reasons. One, I think it's a really interesting video that is also very important, especially for players who may not have found their ideal guitar yet, or who think that, you know, you do need to spend a lot of money to upgrade your guitar to a different brand, not in components. And also because at the same time it's something that could cause a little bit of confusion about what the results of that test were. So if you haven't seen it, a viewer of Glenn's channel said that there's a huge difference between a Les Paul, which is traditionally a humbucker guitar, and an HSS Strat, which, if you're unfamiliar, means it's a Strat with single coil pickups in the neck and middle position and a humbucker in the bridge. So what this person was saying was, if you have a Les Paul and a Strat, both equipped with humbuckers, both of those humbuckers selected on each guitar, there would still be a huge difference in tone. You could easily say that's the Les Paul, that's the Strat. They sound completely different. So the video is a blind test against a Les Paul and an HSS Strat, and then Glenn got pretty clever with this. I enjoyed seeing what he did. In addition to the Les Paul and the Strat, he's put a PRS guitar equipped with EMG humbuckers and a Harley Benton SG shaped guitar that costs, I think, a few $100s. So there's three expensive guitars. You've got an expensive Fender, an expensive custom shop Gibson, and an expensive PRS. I'm not exactly sure the model. I think it would be a USA core model. And then a very much cheaper Harley Benton guitar. And then the other clever thing he did in this test was, there was not only a blind test to tell the difference between them, but there was one of those tests was completely clean, and one of those tests was on the edge of breakup. For the sensible reason that as you layer in heaps of distortion, the nuances between guitars really do start to get lost. So clean, edge of breakup, can we tell the difference? And that was the question of the day. Can we tell the difference? If you find his videos, I'll put links in the descriptions, but you'll see I've commented on both. I'll be transparent with my guesses. And then, so when it came to the results, something else Glenn did that was clever that I certainly didn't think of at the time was, I, and presumably many others, made the assumption that the order of the guitars in the clean test and the edge of breakup test were the same. So if you said, okay, I think guitar A is the PRS, then we assumed it was A in both. And not to give anything away, but that's not exactly true. So what's the purpose here? The purpose is if you can't see the guitar, you know, we hear a lot with our eyes, basically. So if you can't see the guitar and you're stripped of the biases, that you expect this guitar to sound like that. Good or bad, by the way. If you hate the sound of a Les Paul or you hate Gibson, your biases will say, oh, that one sounds terrible. Or, you know, alternatively, you think, I love the sound of Fenders, that sounds the best. When you're stripped of the ability to see that, what does it mean? So the results of the test were, I'll stop calling it a test, it was an experiment. It was an interesting experiment. And the results of it were, no one really consistently got it right. I got, of the clean test, I got A and B right, and I got C and D the wrong way around. And I think that was fairly typical. People got it completely wrong, a little bit right. If people got it completely right, it was the minority. As far as I'm aware, there were a lot of comments on there. The point of that was, we hear a lot with our eyes, and there's not really as much between it as we think. And I think that's a good test. You know, I've long been of the opinion that you don't really need to change pickups in guitars unless they're terrible. I've got BC Rich behind me, I've mentioned before. The pickups were horrendous on that guitar. I swapped it for some Seymour Duncans. That's it. Every other electric guitar I've owned, I've never changed the pickups in them. If you saw my video earlier this year, an interview with John Emsley, who's a professional guitar player, we spoke a little bit about his rig and how he's moved from having a powerful half stack, Marshall half stack, to now using a Helix, which is the digital offering. And he made the point that, you know, when we're sitting in our bedroom, we hear all these nuances in the guitars and the amps that we're playing because there's nothing else there to influence the tone. But the minute we get into a band situation, you're in the mix, and your job is to sound good in the mix. But also being in the mix, being with other people, being with a bass player, a singer, drums, maybe another guitar player, maybe a fuller band. John plays in a 12-piece band. That can massively change the tone. That's the point I want to come back to later in the video. But the purpose of mentioning it now is that it's very easy for us players to get caught up in the moment, you know, or we're playing in our bedrooms or our offices or wherever we are, and you can dial in the perfect tone, just the right amount of everything. It sounds incredible. You can really tell the difference between every guitar and every amp and tweaking this dial that way, and that's great. And then you get into a rehearsal space with other people and you sound completely different. That's just the way it is. So what does that mean for these guitars? So first and foremost, to repeat what I said already, I think it was a really interesting experiment and I'm glad Glenn did it. And I don't want anything in this video to seem like I'm criticizing the purpose of the experiment or the results or the parameters. But I just want to kind of put a bit of a caveat to the results. So the first and foremost, this is a experiment run on YouTube. What does that mean? Okay, well, Glenn is a professional recording engineer. You know, he's been transparent about the equipment he used to record it. So in this instance, I'm not going to criticize his side of it, recording those instruments, but I will say why that's a factor. When you listen to something on YouTube or any recording, we see that guitar being played and we think that's what that guitar sounds like. In reality, this video here, I'm currently filming it on my phone. So you are hearing the sound through my phone's microphone. It's not going to be 100% representation of how things sound in this room to my ears. It'll be a good approximation of it. You know, it'll be very good, but it won't be perfect. So you're hearing the guitar after it's been recorded. It's then been uploaded to YouTube and possibly compressed and tweaked. But then the most important part of this is how you're listening to it. The reason that review videos say listen to this with headphones, good quality headphones, is because good quality headphones make all the difference, a remarkable difference. I bought good headphones earlier this year just for listening to music, and it was like seeing for the first time. It really is a dramatic difference in quality. Meaning what? So if you record a very, very expensive guitar and you record it through world-class equipment, but you're listening to it on your phone speaker just through your ear, you're not going to hear exactly as it should be heard. A lot of things will be stripped out. So that's first and foremost. There's a signal chain, if you like, from the person doing the recording to the person listening, and everything along the way of that chain needs to be high quality for you to hear accurately. That's not Glenn's responsibility. He met his requirements by using first-class recording equipment, but you and other listeners and myself, our responsibility is to listen to it through the best speakers or headphones we can find. My guess is a lot of people would listen to it through their computer speakers. Of course, you're not going to be able to tell much difference. Not that would invalidate the results of the experiment. But if you're really trying to get into the nuance of each guitar's sound, you need to have the appropriate speakers or headphones. So that's point one here. Secondly, the experiment focused on one specific thing, which was comparing humbuckers in different guitars. And Glenn hasn't said otherwise, by the way. This isn't me saying, oh, well, Glenn's trying to prove this, but actually it just did this. The challenge from one of his viewers was, you can tell the difference between a humbucker in a Strat and a humbucker in a Les Paul. And the experiment proved that for a lot of the time you can't. Now, this doesn't mean that there are no differences between other guitars, and I'm going to come back to that very briefly, very shortly. But second to that, the guitars didn't all sound the same. Really what was everyone noticed that actually you could tell there were different guitars being played, right? Guitar A, B, C and D sounded different, we just weren't sure which guitar was which. Now, the reason I bring that up is, this is about, I don't want people to get the conclusion that it doesn't matter what guitar you play, they all sound the same. Glenn's just proven it. They don't, and Glenn hasn't claimed that. What was found was, you can't reliably say that guitar being played is that model. It's a very different thing. Okay, you could tell that this guitar had a bit more top end. This guitar sounded a bit creamier. Whatever words people want to use for these fairly subjective terms. The point is, it wasn't like you listened to guitars A, B, C and D and thought, that's just one guitar being played, I'm being tricked. It wasn't like that. You could tell that every time a guitar was being played, you could tell it was a different one. So to come back to the point I made before, that the challenge for this test was comparing a Strat to a Les Paul, both with humbuckers, to say you can always tell them apart. It's important that the takeaway from that isn't all this talk about Strats versus Les Paul is overblown because they sound the same. Glenn's just proven it. That's not what was shown at all. They still have what I would consider their sort of signature sounds. One of the signature sounds of a Strat is in between positions. So if you're not familiar with that, a Strat has a 5-way pickup selector. So you can play the neck, middle or bridge pickups, but you can also play neck and middle and bridge. Okay, the 2 and 4 positions. These are the positions of the pickup selector that really give that quintessential famous Strat tone, the sort of the quack. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to get that type of quack on other guitars. It is, but you have to work a bit harder to get to it. A Strat is kind of right there. Position 2, position 4, there's just this other sound. So what does that mean? Well, what the experiment wasn't doing was playing that position on a Strat and then comparing it to a neck pickup of a Les Paul with the tone rolled back, that Eric Clapton's famous Woman tone, a really warm, rich, kind of sustaining, creamy tone. It was just this quintessential Les Paul tone. And again, I'm not trying to say that you couldn't dial these tones in on another guitar. You can get very, very close. But if you were to have a Les Paul on a neck pickup with the tone rolled back, and you were doing a comparison with the Strat in position 2 for that emphasized quack, you'd tell the difference a lot easier on a recording. So, oh, okay, that's a warmer tone. That's a quackier tone. So again, this isn't to invalidate the results of this experiment. Again, it's not to say I disagree with it. I'm just trying to put, if you're watching that video and thinking all guitars sound the same, all electric guitars sound the same, it doesn't matter what one I get, that's not the conclusion that was found. So the video showed all guitars did sound different. Similar, very similar, but they're all being played with humbuckers through the same setup and on the same pickup. They were designed to sound like this is what they all sound like in that position, right? It wasn't an exploration of their differences. I think maybe that's the crux of it. It wasn't an exploration of their differences. As guitar players, we are often looking for those differences. So don't watch that video and think they're all the same. They all sound the same. It doesn't matter. You're just paying for a name, this, that, and the other. But the other thing that obviously can't come out in a blind test is the personal nature of guitar playing. The best guitar is the one that makes you play more like you. And it's as simple as that. That could be a Squire. It could be the Harley Benton SG. It could be the £10,000 or $10,000, whatever they cost now, Murphy Lab Les Paul. There's no right or wrong to this, okay? So I think the really good thing about the experiment is to show you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on guitars to get a good one. And a big round of applause to Glenn for really proving that there was an expectation here that you would tell the difference between a Les Paul and a Strat really easily, and also the Harley Benton wouldn't keep up with guitars that cost 10 or 20 times what it cost. Yeah, it did keep up. It kept up in the sense that you didn't listen to, I think those three guitars sound premium and that one sounds cheap. It didn't work that way. So it's a great video for showing you don't need to spend all this money. And you know what, I did a video earlier this year about a 59 reissue Les Paul that I got hanging on the wall here. I'll link to it. But I did the review and the big question on my mind was, is it worth it? And I spent quite a long time in that video really exploring the fact that I couldn't give a simple yes or no answer to it, because you don't need a guitar of that value. Professional musicians, both gigging and in the studio, don't rely on guitars of that price tag. We don't, you kind of want to feel like you're good enough to buy that guitar, rather than saying that's what beginners should learn on, which means we become proficient on cheaper guitars. So it's like there's no kind of point on a graph which is right, it's now time for me to upgrade to a custom shop Gibson. So you don't need it. It's just a personal thing. I prefer the way it feels, or I prefer how much it weighs, or whatever it might be. It's a subjective thing that is the guitar for me. But being the guitar for me doesn't mean I think it's the guitar for everyone else. So with the experiment, that if you put humbucker equipped guitars on that humbucker selection and do a recording, people won't say that's the Strat, that's the Les Paul, that's the Harley Benton. That they will say, okay, I can hear 4 different guitars here. Okay, so that's one thing. You need to pick the one that you prefer the sound of. They sound different. And then ask, what do they feel like in my hands? What do they sound like on the other pickups? What's the diversity of the tones from this guitar? I to buy that Les Paul, I sold a PRS Custom 24. It was an incredibly diverse instrument. The range of tones was just staggering. It was an amazing guitar. It just wasn't for me. But to kind of bring this back, the point is that don't watch that video and think they all sound the same. Equally, don't watch that video and think there's never a point in spending more money, or there's never a point in buying a different guitar other than the cheapest one you could find. I don't think that was what Glenn was trying to prove. It certainly wasn't my takeaway from it. But do be mindful of the fact that a lot of the nuances in the sounds that you're hearing will be lost. And you know, if you were to listen to a record, put a CD on, or Spotify, however you listen to music these days, pick an artist you don't know. So if you're listening to early Clapton, you know it's a Les Paul, and if you listen to later Clapton, you know it's probably a Strat. You know, like again, we hear with our eyes. We've seen certain musicians on stage for years. Pick a band you don't know. Ask someone for a recommendation, and then try and guess what they're playing. You'll probably find that your guess is based on the genre. So if you're listening to a modern band like Dirty Honey, I think, oh, that's, you know, they sound like Led Zeppelin, it must be a Les Paul, or it must be a Teddy, or whatever. But if you just try and listen to it strictly with your ears, and say, okay, that guitar is that, you may guess it right. There's always that chance of, you know, you might guess it, but I don't think you would confidently be able to say, that is that guitar through that amp. It's just, you wouldn't. And I think that's the good test for you to do, because then you can really see for yourself, okay, actually as a listener, you know, it's just not there. And then kind of equal to that is, come back to this point about the recording equipment. You know, your listeners aren't hearing your unadulterated sound. They're hearing what once has been recorded and then potentially compressed and having all these kind of effects and things added to it, and then through their speakers and headphones. So the guitar that you buy needs to be bought for your personal reasons. And yeah, you know, some to your ears, some will sound perfect. I'm not saying otherwise, they will. That Les Paul is the best sounding guitar I've heard in person. But at the same time, I'm still aware that if I get on stage in a loud rock band, people in the audience are going to go, wow, can you hear that custom shop Les Paul? You can tell. They couldn't tell. It's for me, it's not for them. So if you haven't watched Glenn's videos, there's two of them. There's the first one with the experiment and the second with the results. I would strongly encourage you to watch them. I think it's been a very good demonstration that we can really, as guitar players, we can really get into the weeds with this kind of chasing tone and thinking that I'll only play this brand, or I won't spend more than this much money, and whatever your personal kind of opinions can be. And, you know, see if you can guess the guitars right. I had fun doing that. It was an interesting thing to do. Just be mindful of a couple of things. First, if you're going to do it, use headphones, and obviously if you've got an amazing home audio rig, then use that. But you know, I'm assuming most of you have computers or headphones. Listen to them through headphones, ideally good quality headphones. Don't just think, I can't tell which is which, so they're all the same. But do pay attention to, I can't tell which is which, but I can tell that they're different. Is that true for you? Maybe it's not true for you. And then, as I said before as well, just bear in mind that this wasn't a complete run through of each guitar. This is all the sounds this one can do and all the sounds this one can do. It was, this is what they sound like on the humbucker pickup with the knobs and volume dials, so the tone and volume dials turned the same, presumably all on 10. Okay, so these aren't guitar reviews, it's an ear review. So let me know what you think in the comments. I think it's a really interesting discussion. So if you have thoughts on this, let me know. And if you haven't watched Glenn's video, there'll be a link in the description, and I really do recommend you watch it.